Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshurum Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Suyuta Parakalam Shri Guru Vaishnava Shri Rupam Sarjatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paridasaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Viratpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurani Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpadrubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavani Ashyata Deshakarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaurabhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, we've been talking a little bit about detaching from the material world and how Krishna has explained that detaching from the material world is the key to success, and how it gives us our opportunity for eternal peace and happiness. And sometimes we have doubts, or we wonder, how do we know that's the answer? We certainly understand that the material world is certainly full of its imperfections. Some may argue it's full of more imperfections than perfections, that there is more distress than happiness, but it's a mixture certainly of both. And we find lots of turbulent experiences that we all have in the material world. Anybody's had a full life of just complete unending bliss in the material world? No setbacks? No disturbances? Impossible. How about at least 1 year?
No, 1 day, no.
Not even 1 day? Without some turbulence, right? Some disturbances. Right? What are disturbances or turbulence? Not air turbulence, but it's disturbances, things that get in the way of our desired objective. Right? What is our singular goal in life?
Happy.
To be happy. That's it. Does anybody have any other goal? I ask this question a lot. I'll ask it again. Anybody woke up this morning wanting to be unhappy? No. Well, you never do. Every day we wake up wanting to be happy and to find happiness. Right? So the goal is one amongst all. It's a universal goal. And it's this constant goal. It's the singular goal that we have throughout our journey. And so when we find disturbances, those disturbances are simply things that are getting in the way of our desired goal. That's what they are. And so we know at least we haven't found that undisturbed happiness that we're looking for. So Krishna is telling us that we must detach from the material world. It's the only means to get there. And he talked about surrender in the 5th verse, that we must surrender to the Supreme Lord. And surrender requires, a little bit of acknowledgement. It's the ego shattering. It's the humbling realization that I am not my own independent provider of happiness. I am not the independent enjoyer. My enjoyment is dependent on somebody else. Just like we know, if you go on vacation, your happiness is dependent on so many things beyond your control. What the weather is like. If the weather is terrible, if you're on a beach vacation and it's snowing, are you going to enjoy our happiness, we know, is dependent on so many things. Right? Our whole existence. Right? We talk about what would happen if the sun did not rise tomorrow. What would our happiness be like? We would be in big trouble. Right? We would be in big trouble. We wouldn't be sure what to do. But none of us have control over that rising of the sun. Right? We realize our lack of control, particularly when the body starts to fail. Right? When one small part of the body just stops working, what happens to our whole experience? You can be in the midst of trying to enjoy something amazingly, but as soon as the body stops working, any small part of it, our whole experience is upended. Right? So the Krishna is reminding that we are not the independent enjoyer, but we are a dependent enjoyer. Just like if, we have a friend who has a very luxurious home, and in this home they have so many wonderful toys, facilities. Nice boat, big TVs, pool tables, swimming pool, all these things, right? And we knock on the door and say, "Oh, dear friend." And friend says, "Come in." Yes, and make yourself at home, right? What's mine is yours, our friend will say in close relationship, right? And so we are enjoying. But in the back of our mind, we know something. What is that one thing we remember?
It's not ours.
It's not ours. And at some point, our friend is going to say, it's time to go home. Not for me, but for you. Yeah. Depending on the nature of the friendship, that duration will be plus or minus. Right? But at some point. So we know our ability to enjoy that friend's home is dependent on the mercy of our friend. Right? That's, we understand very clearly. So if we take that example and just kind of, extrapolate it further, I think we said last time, what did we come into this world with?
Nothing.
And what are we going to leave it with?
Nothing.
So everything that we are trying to enjoy in this world is someone else's resources, someone else's facilities. So that by definition makes us the dependent enjoyer. And this is where each of us have the opportunity to realize our situation, which is a factual reality, and then learn how to actually enjoy completely. And in the material world, in the relative of this, the independent enjoyer in the material world, not completely independent, but in relative fashion, gets to enjoy more than the dependent enjoyer, right? They get to control what we do, when we're there, all of those things. But in the spiritual world, we know who is the independent enjoyer? Is there any other independent enjoyer? No. Krishna is the singular because he is Anadir Adir. He is the source of everything. He is Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of everything. So being the supreme source and the cause of everything, he can cause his own enjoyment. He can cause his own, he is the source of his own enjoyment. Right? So he is the independent. But we are not an Adir. We're not the source of really much. Right? So this realization brings us to the point of surrendering to the Supreme Lord. And then we must understand that, okay, then what is my situation when I surrender to the Lord? Right? We know in the material world when we surrender to our employer, what happens? Yeah. We get asked to do so much work, and the boss gives us the least amount of compensation is required to get us back to come back tomorrow. Right? And then we always complain about this and that. Right? That's the relationship in the material world. But the relationship with the Supreme Lord in surrender is completely opposite. Actually, whatever it is that we surrender to Krishna, Krishna surrenders back to us many, many, many times more. So whatever it is that we can give to Krishna, how does that compare to what Krishna can give to us? Who wins in that equation? I always give the example of a child in the home. Right? When a child is doing some service and surrenders something of theirs to father and mother, right? How does mother and father reciprocate?
Multiple that.
Many times more, right? Who is the winner in that transaction?
Child.
And that is like our relationship with the Supreme Lord. Right? So, Krishna spoke a little bit about his material world yesterday, or supreme spiritual world last time. But now, this verse that we'll discuss today, the 7th verse, gives us the conclusive evidence of why this surrender to Krishna is the only means to find our real everlasting happiness. And I have to emphasize, it is the only means, the exclusive means. Which is why Krishna told Arjuna at the end of Bhagavad Gita, Mam ekam. You surrender unto me. You abandon all other dharma. Right? Why? Because of this verse. So let's read verse 7 and then we'll discuss.
599.
599.
Can I read?
Yeah.
The living entities in this conditional world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. In this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatana. According to Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. In other words, the Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion and the living entities are the separated expansions. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms like the Lord Ram, Narsimhadev, Vishnu Murti and all the predominating deities in the Vaikuntha planets. Someone else wants to carry on?
Can I read?
Yeah, please. Thank you.
The separated expansions, the living entities are eternally servitors. The personal expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, parts and parcel of the Supreme Lord. The living entities also have a fragmental portion of his qualities, of which independence is one. Every living entity is an individual soul, as is personality individuality and a minute form of soul, and by proper use of independence is always liberated. In either case, he is a qualitative eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from his material conditions, and he is under engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditional life, he is dominated by the material moods of nature, and he forgets the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle every hour to maintain his existence in the material world. Someone else to give? Yeah, the living entities, not only human beings and the cats and the dogs, but even the greater control of the material world. Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and even Lord Shiva and even Vishnu are all parts and parcel of Supreme Lord. They are all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word karshati means struggling or grappling hard is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of patience, his activities are troublesome. When the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels in the lower spaces of life. It is clear, however, in this verse, that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body with the mind and the senses, and when he is liberated, this material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. The following information is there in the Madhyandinaya Shruti.
You can skip to English.
Yeah. Sava ye Can I?
Yeah, you can go
Yeah,
ahead
yeah.
and understand.
Yeah. It is stated here that when a living entity gives up his material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body, and in his spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. From Smriti is also it is understood that Vasanti Yatra Purushat Sarve Vaikunta Muktaha. In the spiritual planets, everyone lives in the bodies featured like the Supreme Personality of Godheads. As far as the bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the parts and parcel living entities. And the expansion of Vishnu Murti. In the other words, at liberation, the living entities gets a spiritual body by the grace of Supreme Personality of Godhead.
The words Mama, Vamsa, fragmentary parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord are also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here because the Sanskrit word Sanatana is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. That fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in the spiritual sky, in the spiritual planet, and enjoys the association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmentary part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcel of gold are also gold.
Okay, long purport. Lots to unpack here. So, Krishna again says, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to the conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. So, lots of very important concepts in this single verse that Krishna is speaking here. So the first, Krishna is acknowledging what is the nature of our life in this world? Eternal. Easy or
Hard.
hard? Right? He uses the word karshati, struggling. So it's a struggle. Alright? So the first thing we learned when we come to Krishna consciousness is that I'm not this body. And who am I? Soul. Right? I'm spirit soul. So that's step one. But then the next logical question is what about the soul? What's our next logical question? Is that complete knowledge? I'm knowing I'm spirit soul?
No. What's my purpose?
What's my purpose?
What's my relation?
What's my relation? What else do we want to know about the soul?
Soul is part and parcel of Krishna.
Yeah. Right? Where did it come from?
Yeah.
If I am the soul, where did I come from? Right? Like, we always identify with who we are in the material sense, in our bodily sense. Where did I come from? Right? I have my name, I have my birth date, I have my birthplace, I have my lineage. I have so many identifications, and that are very important to us, right? But we know all those designations are temporary, Right? All those things, what will my passport look like 100 years from now? Right? But my soul, my real identity, okay, if I am spirit soul, then where did my soul come from? What is its identity? Right? So that we must understand in order to complete the understanding of who am I. So just knowing I'm spirit soul is the first step. But then, where does the soul come from? So what does Krishna tell us here? What is the soul?
Part and parcel of Krishna.
It is part and parcel of
Krishna.
Krishna. Which souls?
Living.
Your soul or my soul or the tree?
Every.
Every soul. Every soul? Even the ones on Jupiter and Mars and the Sun planet and other planets too? They're all part and parcel of Krishna? Right, so Krishna is saying, My Vamsho Jiva Loka. The living entities are my fragmental parts. So this gives us a very important conclusion, which is that our eternal relationship is with Krishna. Right? So when we say that our loving relationship with the Supreme Lord, we say that it is a natural relationship. Right? Why is it natural? So I was giving this example a few weeks ago in a different session, that when a baby emerges from the womb of mother, does the baby need to be introduced to mother? My dear child, this is your mother. Baby will be crying, crying, crying. But when it reaches the hands of mother, what does the baby feel? It's connected. And why is there that connection?
It's familiar to the mother.
Right? It's not eternal though. Because the baby is coming from mother. Right? So there's a natural connectivity. Right? When we go and we have, we go to a family reunion and we become introduced to some distant cousin or someone we never knew about, and we begin to meet this person. Instantly there's a bond. Why is there a bond?
Blood relation.
Right? There's a bond of family. There's a familial connection, right? We know that connection now is a material connection, but there's a connection. Right? So there's a natural relationship that exists. Okay? So if my soul is part and parcel of Krishna, then what is the nature, what must be the nature of my relationship with Krishna?
Natural.
And a natural relationship of love. That's the definition of parts and parcel, right? The baby's natural relationship with mother is of love. So we, being the children of the Supreme Lord, our relationship with the Supreme Lord is one of love. And it is not one that we have to go and try to discover, It is innate to who we are. And so when I said that our surrender to Krishna is the only means to finding our happiness, we can see, because Krishna is our only source. He is our eternal relationship. Right? So then the question becomes, we have one quality that Srila Prabhupada points out in the first paragraph that speaks to why we have forgotten that. What is that? There's a particular quality that Krishna has. So if Krishna has it, it means we also have it. right? If Krishna has certain qualities and we are part of him, we'll also have those qualities. In small quantity, but we'll have. So anyone remember what quality did Prabhupada speak about that helps explain why we are in this current situation?
Enjoy.
Huh?
Enjoy. Separately.
How did we get into this condition? How did we get separated from Krishna?
Committed some ego problems, and we thought we were
Independent.
we could do things on our own.
Controller.
The controller. So Prabhupada says that Krishna has what kind of independence?
Doer. He's the doer.
But what is the nature of Krishna's independence?
Independent joy.
Controller.
It's complete. It's absolute. But we also have some independence. And what is that independence?
Minute.
Free will,
Our free will. And it is
limited.
minute. We have the free will, right? So we have the free will to choose. And as Prabhuji said, we chose, due to some ego, to be separated from Krishna. So we have the free will to make that choice. But we know our free will is not absolute. Right? If I want it to be 80 degrees tomorrow, will it be 80 degrees tomorrow? No. But if Krishna wants it to be 80 degrees tomorrow, will it be 80 degrees tomorrow?
Yes.
Yes. Understand in simple terms the difference between our free will and Krishna's free will? Right? So Krishna's free will is absolute. But our free will is limited. Right? So we got to this position because of our free will. Right? And in essence, we were going against the nature of our relationship. We wanted to be separated from Krishna. How unnatural is that for the living entity? As unnatural is, does a fish ever say, I want to be separated from water, I'm tired of being wet, I don't like being wet all the time, I want to go on the beach and soak up the sun? Does a fish ever speak that way? No. If a fish spoke that way and was given all the wealth in the world, all the luxuries, more prasadam than Mataji's will eat tomorrow, all the wonderful aspects of life, will the fish be happy?
No. No.
What will be the condition, the state of mind of that fish?
Not happy.
Suffering.
It'll be disturbed. Why?
Because not getting what she wants.
It's not in its natural position.
It's not in its natural environment, its natural position, which is in the water. So similarly, the fragmental part, the living entity, when it's under the control of modes of material nature, it is not in its natural state. And so what is our condition? How does Krishna describe our condition in this material world?
Struggling.
Struggling. Just as what is the nature of the fish on the water, out in the water? Struggling. Right? So because we are part and parcel of Krishna, the only relief to our struggle is reconnecting with Krishna. There's no other solution. We've invented so many solutions trying to relieve our struggles. Right? We try to find different ways to entertain ourselves. We find different ways to feed ourselves. Different places, styles of living, different medicines to cure different ailments, different beauty products, clothing, all these different things we're trying, but is any of it working?
No.
It gives maybe some temporary, short-term satisfaction, but ultimately, it actually makes the situation even worse. It's kind of like when you have a rash. What happens when you scratch it at first?
It's satisfaction.
Feels good. And then what happens?
It's worse.
More difficulty and more suffering. Right? That's a little bit like the fragmental part of Krishna trying to enjoy the material. We get some rasa, some satisfaction. But afterwards comes more struggle, more difficulty. So being the fragmental part of the Supreme Lord, we have only one real shelter. And whose choice is it of whether we're going to reconnect with the Lord or not?
Ours.
Ours. Is that a temporary or eternal choice?
Till we make it eternally.
It's eternal. It's always our choice. Krishna will never force it upon us. Right? So, in essence, surrender means, Krishna, I am not responsible for my free will. You please take it and direct me as to what to do. Because my execution of free will brought me here. But actually, I know I am your fragmental part. And thus, I shall surrender unto you. So this is the position of the living entity. Right? And Krishna is going to speak in the coming verses about how by making different choices, we go through different bodies and how the soul transmigrates from one place to the next by exercising this free will. So let's talk a little bit about the mind. What is this? What is the status of the mind of the world as a whole? Healthy or unhealthy? Unhealthy. I've been saying this in a lot of class. I don't know if I said it here, but I'll say it here again. What would happen to the world if we all could read each other's mind?
Oh boy.
Imagine we're all sitting here and above our head is playing like a video screen and transcribing all of our thoughts. We all would look at each other and say, "You rascal." And we'd be slapping. We'd all run and we'd never get together again. How many friends would we have if everybody could read our mind? One. Yeah, our dog maybe, right?
Thanking Krishna.
Krishna, yes. Because the mind is so turbulent. It's filled with so many crazy ideas and thoughts, right? So Krishna's acknowledging this mind is a struggle, right? And we see it all around us. What are the consequences of an uncontrolled mind in the world that we see? What do we see? Wars. That's it?
Newspapers. Full of news.
Newspapers full of news.
So many people.
Climate issues. How many of us would like to live in a city? Let's say there was one city on earth that everybody had a nice controlled mind. Would you like to live in that city?
You don't have to lock the doors.
You wouldn't have to lock the doors, right? Nobody would come and take things that aren't theirs. Everybody would have good consciousness, right? So this mind is struggling. So Krishna says that the mind, along with the senses, right? Sorry, he's saying the six senses, which include the mind. So how do the mind and senses interact? Very important to understand. If we have thoughts in our mind that we're not excited about to share with anybody, the one question we might ask is, where do they come from? Right? If we have these ideas and thoughts in our mind, where do they come from? How did we acquire those? So, how did we acquire those thoughts in our mind?
Intelligence. Intelligence.
How in the intelligence?
From our senses.
Okay, how from our senses?
Like you see the food and the mind think, why they drag the mind in that direction.
Okay.
Or you want to see something and the mind goes there, or you want to go somewhere. And all those senses, I want to do
What we
this.
see and hear.
I want to eat this, or I want to go
I want
there.
to eat there, go what you see and hear, right?
Yeah, and they're dragging the mind.
What's the definition of a really good marketing company? What defines a marketing company being very good?
Understand the customers what they want.
Sense. They
They
convince
sense
that
the
they
Read
can
the mind.
They can sell you something what you don't even want.
But you don't even, they can create such a strong
Desire.
desire in the
Desire.
mind
Mhm.
to have something that you don't even need or even want, right? So the senses are the gateway to the mind. Whatever we see, desires start to populate the mind. Whatever we hear, desires populate the mind. Taste, touch, smell. Right? So the senses are the gateway to the mind. So how we accumulated all these thoughts? By our roaming senses in the material world. Now we're going to say, I don't remember that. Remember, our mind, as we'll see, it carries forward body after body. So this mind that we have is not just from this body, but from the beginning of our entrance into the material world. So it's an accumulation of many, many lifetimes of thoughts and ideas. So how, if we want to stop polluting the mind, what do we need to do?
Control our senses.
Be very cautious of where we let the senses roam. We protect the senses of our children by saying, don't watch this, don't talk to this. Why? Because we don't want them to develop those ideas. But as we grow up as adults, we still have that same sense, perception, opportunity, and risk. And so, as we learn in the second chapter, the yogi understands how to use the senses very intelligently. Use the senses in service of the Lord, but restrain them in the midst of material allurements. Because it will create thoughts and desires in the mind. And once there's a desire in the mind, it's very difficult to get it out. So, now, what is the role of intelligence?
Well, I'm thinking of the chariot example. So
Yeah.
intelligence guides the mind. Mind keeps a tab on the senses.
Yeah. So, can you explain a little bit further in this relationship? Yeah. How can we then use the intelligence in relation to the mind and senses?
We can control the senses by intelligently directing them. So, for example, rather than watching nonsense, we can engage in taking darshan of Radha Krishna, for instance. So many different examples. So, because the senses can be not blocked, so need to be engaged positively, intelligently.
Sense control does not mean stopping the senses.
Replacing it with something higher.
Spirituality is not about stopping the senses. Spirituality is about engaging the senses very vibrantly, but doing so with intelligence. Knowing which engagements are beneficial for me and which engagements are detrimental for me. That's intelligence.
It is good and bad.
What is good and bad. And if you have strong intelligence, then even a corrupt mind does not become problematic. How so? If you have strong intelligence, even a polluted mind does not become a problem. How is that so?
Then you know the difference between right and wrong.
If you know the difference between right and wrong, then
You
You can control the
you can
senses.
engage in the good activity.
you can control the senses and you can control the
Mind.
mind. And so the mind is going to give all kinds of ideas. But the intelligence has to decide, am I going to do it or not? So Krishna tells, let the mind's desires flow. Don't worry about it. You can't stop it anyways. But don't act on it. With intelligence, don't act on it. Use your intelligence to know that I am a fragmental part of Krishna. My only source of happiness, of peace, is in my eternal relationship with the Lord. Even if I have forgotten this relationship, the relationship exists. Okay? If I'm separated from my mother and father at birth and I don't know who they are, it doesn't negate the relationship. It's still there. I just don't know what it is. So we may have forgotten our relationship with the Supreme Lord, but that doesn't negate the relationship. And awakening our Krishna consciousness is not about developing a relationship with the Lord. It's simply remembering it. Because that relationship is sanatana, eternal. Because we are his part and parcel. And because we are his part and parcel, there is going to be no other source of our happiness. Right? And of course, when Krishna, we know, when in the spiritual world, who enjoys more, Krishna or his devotees? Just like in a home, who enjoys more, mother and father or the kids?
Kids.
Always, right? Krishna gives enjoyment to his. So being the dependent enjoyer in the spiritual world is the topmost position. But it takes the false ego, removing the false ego, to understand who I actually am. And then acting in that relationship. And that will become manifest. Right? So this is the relationship. Just one final comment. This being part and parcel of the Lord, the idea of being separated from the Lord today in our part, and then at some point later being merged back in. Krishna here immediately refutes by saying eternal fragmental parts. So in the liberated state, what is our situation?
Individual existence with Krishna.
Individual existence. We always have our individuality. That is an eternal state. But Krishna said in the very beginning of the chapter of Bhagavad Gita, never was there a time that I did not exist, nor you, never shall either of us cease to be. Even in the liberated state. And do we have a body in the liberated state?
Spiritual.
We have a spiritual body. Our medical professionals in the room, sorry, no work for you in the spiritual world. Because these bodies don't break down. These are eternal. They're not machinery, but don't worry, there'll be other wonderful engagements. All of our lawyers in the room, no need. There's no conflict. Most of the occupations we have in the material world, no need. The only occupation in the spiritual world is enjoy with Krishna. But we have a body. We have a spiritual body. So the soul, when it goes back to the spiritual world, it regains its spiritual form. Not formless. It's not floating. No, there's an actual place. Vaikuntha Lok, Goloka, these places, where we express and experience our individual relationship with the Supreme Lord. And that is an eternal fact. So our separated stance from Krishna is eternal. Our current situation of being separated from the Lord in consciousness is what we are in the process of undoing and reconnecting with our eternal Father. And that's why Krishna has told us, We should surrender to Him. That's why Krishna is going to conclude this whole Bhagavad Gita. Sarva dharma parityaja mamekam. He's telling you, Arjuna, you surrender all other varieties of religion, just surrender unto me. Now we know why. Because we're all His fragmental parts. Okay? Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Any questions, comments, discussion, any realizations, something to share?
Prabhuji, I have a,
Yes,
I don't know,
Yeah.
it's not a good question, but
always.
when you say we should surrender to Krishna,
Uh-huh.
in simple language, what does that mean?
And
I know we can say ABCD like chanting and reading books and all that, but beside, I mean, how you will explain?
surrender to Krishna means really, in essence, recognizing that we are His part and parcel, and we are eternally His servants. And so acting in that understanding. So dedicating my whole life to serving the Supreme Lord.
So in my day-to-day life, how that,
Yeah.
then it comes down to cooking.
How to practically apply it. Absolutely. So surrender to Krishna doesn't mean surrender to Krishna doesn't mean that, I'm going to go to the office and bang on a mridanga all day long. That's not surrender to Krishna, right? There are different ways to surrender. So in Grihastha Ashram, surrender to Krishna means that, I'm going to go to the office and I'm going to earn a living. The only question is, what am I going to do with that fruit? That's the question. So the surrendered devotee goes to the office and the materialist goes to the office. They both carry a briefcase or whatever their job requires, but the difference is in
Mind and heart.
consciousness. So the devotee goes to the office to make a living, to maintain a home. But it is not, the devotee doesn't think this is my home. This is Krishna's home. I am a servant in Krishna's house. So I'm maintaining the house, but it's Krishna's house. I have family. They are my family. But eternally they are whose family? Krishna's family. So my opportunity is to serve my family in connecting them back to their eternal family, Krishna. Right? So we educate our children. How is that surrendering to Krishna? Because we're educating our children on how to navigate the material world. You have to. But if I only focus on that, and I don't educate them on how to actually navigate this world, and focus on material education, just showing them how to eat nicely, sleep nicely, mate nicely, and defend nicely, I know the result is going to be struggle, karshati. So I have to educate how to use the material world also in service of Krishna. So this yukta vairagya, this renunciation, is not renouncing the material world. It's using the facilities of the material world in the service of the Supreme Lord. So whatever ability, whatever capabilities we have, where did those capabilities come from? Where did they come from? Krishna is ultimately the source of our capabilities. So if we neglect those capabilities and sit idle, we are neglecting a gift from the Lord. So we should use the abilities, but use them in the service of the Lord. Right? So that is the the practical means of how we make our life full of the Supreme Lord, centered around Him, and thus we are surrendered to Him, recognizing that I am the dependent enjoyer, dependent on the Supreme Lord.
So Prabhuji, if suppose you are blind in your life,
You're what?
suppose you're applying all this in your life and you're trying, and still you see your mind is having those turbulence. So is that means that there is whatever you're doing there is something lacking, or it's just a consistent process?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Maybe.
Suppose you're surrendering and you're bringing Krishna in the center of your life. So, but you are having those turbulence in the mind. Is that means you are in a consistent process, or is that means something is lacking in your practice?
Yeah, it's likely there's something that we can do to improve the execution, right? I give the example, I like to use the example of the gym. If I'm going to the gym and my body's not turning into the way I want it to be, is it a problem with the gym?
No.
Probably a problem with my application. Okay, let me find. So what do I do?
Try now. Better.
Yeah, you get a trainer, someone who knows how to use it, and they show you how to do it. Because me figuring it out myself isn't going to work, right? So I get somebody to help me. So similarly, practicing Krishna consciousness. That's why Krishna said, we must approach a bona fide spiritual master who can guide us in the process, so that our surrender can become properly fulfilled and executed.
You need Diksha Guru and Siksha Guru. Right?
Yeah. We need Guru in our life to guide us. We need Guru in all aspects of life. What did we learn in this world without some teacher? Forget about spiritual, material, everything. So how are we going to learn spiritual surrender, right? So that means, okay, so if I'm surrendering but still the mind is turbulent, I got to make some adjustments. And remember, surrender is not a light switch on or off. It's progression. Right? I might be 1% surrendered, great. Tomorrow 2%. Just take steps. Don't expect to be at 100% surrendered overnight. It's not practical. Right? Because we've spent so many lifetimes surrendering to our false ego and surrendering to our senses. Now to surrender to Krishna, it'll take some time. But don't take too much time. That's what I'm saying. Finish your business in this lifetime. Don't think Kali Yuga is not getting any better, as we see. It's only getting worse. So we should apply these principles and take guidance and surrender.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely that helps, Prabhu. Guru, Siksha Guru and Diksha Guru, because my son, he studied, but what happens if he put the music on, but what music Prabhupada songs, and then he studied.
That's beautiful.
This is really like, I like it, and he does it on his own, so definitely Diksha Guru, Siksha Guru makes huge difference in your life.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
You should have seen him last week.
Yeah.
Maybe question or comment. Mind, I believe mind is a part of material manifestation, right? So I was trying to comprehend the comment you made. It comes with us to the next lives or...
The next lives?
Yeah, how is that possible if it's... I mean, I was assuming or under the impression that your mind, whatever for this lifetime, just goes away with this particular body.
So we have two types of body, the gross body and the subtle body. So the gross body is our arms, legs, hands, features, organs, all the things we can see, right? It's gross, you can touch it. That's what's made of earth, air, fire, water, ether. So the soul will leave that body behind. But the mind, intelligence, and false ego, these are the three components of the subtle body. Those will carry the soul into its next gross body. So my mind, I'm carrying forward into the next body. It's still material. It manifested from the material energy. It's made from the material energy. But the gross body is what is left behind as the soul transmigrates. And it comes with the mind, intelligence, and false ego.
So the covering is still there, like partial. The ghost is gone, but subtle is there.
The false ego that we have today is a false ego we've accumulated over millions of lifetimes. So now we think, I've been chanting 1 year, 2 years, why I'm still not thinking, I still think I'm this body. Keep chiseling away. Keep chiseling away with the hammer. It's a big trouble.
Thanks for clarification.
Anything else? Alright, thank you much. Shila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Jai Prabhupada Vaishnava Vrinda.